As we honor Hispanic Heritage Month, the Reverend Dr. Lydia Munoz reminds us of the importance of listening to one another's stories and respecting one another's journeys as we live into a diverse and inclusive church that encompasses a rich tapestry of Hispanic and Latine heritage in the United States. Lydia, welcome to Get Your Spirit in Shape.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so happy to have you here. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself? I know it could go for a long time because you've done so many things in the church,
Oh,
but if you could just give us a brief snapshot of about yourself.
sure. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, so I am Reverend Dr. Lydia Munoz, and I am an elder in the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference, and I currently serve in Extension Ministry as the Executive Director of the Plan for Hispanic Latino Ministry of the United Methodist Church. Let's start there.
Okay, great. Yes, let's start there. One of the reasons I've not ever met you until today, but I've definitely heard your name through the years because of all the ministry that you have done in the United Methodist Church. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on at this particular time is because we are in a season that's referred to as Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yes.
And I feel like that there's many people in the United Methodist Church who don't realize the vibrancy of Spanish speaking United Methodist in the United States and in other
Mhm.
parts of the world. But particularly here in the United States, there is a focus and a very active ministry. And I want to talk about that. I just feel like that's something that I didn't realize was going on in the church until I became a part of an agency, a United Methodist
Oh,
agency.
mhm.
So sometimes I figure if I don't know about it, maybe there's others who don't know about it either. So let's start off and just can you tell us a little bit what is the national plan for Hispanic Latino ministry?
Great. Well, we have six ethnic plans in the United Methodist Church, and I happen to be the executive director of one of them, which is the plan. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the story of the name. It used to be the National Plan for Hispanic Ministry, which started in 1992 was when the office was formed. It was a mandate from General Conference, just like all our other ethnic plans, to respond to the growing community, the growing population in the United States of Hispanic Latinos. And according to the Pew Research, which I was just reading yesterday, 2023, 65 million of us identify as Hispanic Latin persons in the United States, which is a big increase. And the trend is that by 2045 or 2050, we will be 30% of the population, which is the largest ethnic group in the country. And so I think God was in the midst of our deliberations, and for those who believe that sometimes all this legislation and all these meetings and what is it doing, somehow or another, God does incredible things even through our our perceived chaos. And out of that 1988 General Conference, the initial beginning of what would it look like to have a strategy became to get some bones, meat and bones, and then in 1992 it was official. And then at that point we were called the National Plan for Hispanic Ministry. And then later on, we began to change it to Hispanic Latino Ministry because of the inclusion of our Brazilian siblings and other siblings who speak Spanish but are not considered Hispanic in the census, right? And of course that has been progressively changing. Now we are confronted with the idea that there are other ways to identify a Hispanic Latino community, and Latin is one of those terms that you'll hear me using as I self-identify in that way. And it's a much more broader, inclusive term to refer to people who speak Spanish or who have that history behind them.
Thank you for helping us understand this segment of our church, of our population. And because I think as we understand, there's a place for perhaps, I believe as we understand, we can better have relationships.
Mm,
And as a church, we are about loving one another, respecting
absolutely.
our identities
Yes.
and our diversity.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I appreciate that you just took the time to help our audience and me understand how we kind of move forward, even in conversation. I mean, that can feel
Absolutely.
awkward as well. It's like, I don't
Absolutely.
know what to say. So thank you for doing that. And we were having a conversation before we started the podcast just about what does inclusion really mean in our church?
Mm, mm.
And we probably could talk for 3 or 4 days about that. But can we just, let's talk about that for just a minute. We do have 6 ethnic plans,
Mhm.
and how does that inform who we are as a worldwide denomination?
I'm glad that you asked that question because one of the things that changed, another change that has happened to the name, happened at this general conference. The plan, which was formerly referred to as the national plan, has changed to be just the plan. We've dropped the national because it was very US centric. Because recognizing that the story of Hispanic Latine persons here in the United States is very closely tied with the story of origins in Latin America. So most Latine persons do not disconnect from their country of origin, whether it's through their abuelas or their uncles and aunts and cousins, or somehow there's a connection there. So the reality is that most of us live these two worlds, right? One world of the U.S. mainland, and the other one a connection to our country of origin. So very often you'll hear people talk about, even though they're U.S. citizens, and even though they're part of this, really connect with Mexican Independence Day, or yesterday was Roberto Clemente Day. That's a big deal for us as Puerto Ricans, myself, and this whole season or this first week of the Hispanic Latino Heritage Month is, most of Latin America has Independence Day. And so you see the connection that even with the fact that we made it an official celebration here in the US, it connects to our roots in Latin America. So, we decided to honor that by dropping the national. We're not just this national entity that works here in the United States, but we want to connect, build bridges to Methodist presence and expressions all over the world. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that we're making some inroads into being really living into what it looks like to be a worldwide church, a worldwide
Exactly,
denomination.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, to your point about inclusion, this is where the hard work of honoring what it means to work towards the common good, right? I don't know if Wesley had that in his mind about the common good, but my sense is that he did when he said, do all the good you can, all the ways you can, to all the people you can, right? That whole concept of seeking the common good. And so it means that we have to do the hard work of listening to each other, right? Even in the hardest of conversations, and respecting each other. The truth is that I don't necessarily have to believe exactly like you, but I do have to respect you enough to say, that's not where I am, but I honor where you are, and we can still be in community and work. You're still in as sacred to me as I'm hoping that I am to you, and we need each other in this work. So I think inclusion is about that. Inclusion is about it's about listening to stories of that require us to walk a little bit in the shoes of someone else so that we know, what does justice look like to them? There's something that UMCOR does that I really love when they go into disaster areas, as we often do. We're amazing about that. One of the first things that they do is they create a team of the people who are most impacted by the disaster and allow that person or those persons to inform how they're going to do recovery work. I think that is such a powerful image. And I wonder what it would look like if we allowed our conversations, especially in the United Methodist Church, as we come out of General Conference and the decisions we made, if we allowed the people who have been most impacted by the last 40, 50 years of conversation to be the ones to guide our next phase. What would that do? And that to me feels like inclusion. It feels like, I'm stepping back to let someone in, and not only that, to let somebody in, but to let somebody maybe lead me through a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but wouldn't that be that's a prayer to
Yeah, it is a
to
prayer.
to move forward in that thoughtful and intentionally inclusive way
Hmm. Hmm.
to undo and perhaps and start some healing for the
Hmm.
harm that's
Hmm.
been done.
Yeah, absolutely.
I shared with you before that you don't know what you don't know. That's, we hear that. And I become more every time I have a conversation with someone who is didn't grow up in the South, isn't white, isn't, all the things that I am.
Hmm.
I realize that the lens that I see the world, the lens that I see the church in is very much my lens. And I'm missing things. I'm missing richness, and I'm
Mm.
missing different perspectives. And I feel like that's what inclusion is too, is
Absolutely.
to open ourselves to looking at our current situation through a different lens that other than the
Mhm.
ones we, naturally
Mhm.
naturally have. Lydia, did you grow up in the United Methodist Church?
No, I did not. I grew up in it's a long story, but I'm going to try to shorten it up. I grew up in the Assemblies of God Church. In fact, I was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My parents, Puerto Rican, obviously, moved to New York and then moved to Lancaster following work, just like a lot of migrant families do. So, looking for work, they were part of the founding of a very large Hispanic congregation in Lancaster. In fact, one of the largest in the Northeast, Assemblies of God Church. And yeah, grew up there. And then there, my mom and dad kind of received their call to be missionaries. They wanted to be missionaries. And so I was starting my second grade, and they moved us to Guatemala. So we drove from Lancaster, Pennsylvania in a VW pop-up camper van from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Guatemala. And then I lived for a long time in Guatemala. And while we were in Guatemala, my parents were still under the Assemblies of God, but my dad came in contact with Mennonite missionaries. And if you know anything about Mennonite missionaries, they're just incredible. And so my dad really kind of gravitated to that, even though in something to understand in the in many parts of Latin America, the charismatic movement is much more popular, right? I think some of the reasons is because it's very lay oriented. So it's empowering. You could be washing dishes on Thursday at work, but be a pastor on Sunday morning, right? So that is very empowering. And of course, the charismatic movement fits well into a community who have had to wrestle with their colonial reality of the religion imposed, their upbringing or their indigenous roots, right? And how to mesh those two together. I think that's where the attraction also to the charismatic movement comes from, although many of the evangelical churches kind of push against the indigenous spirituality, unfortunately. So he became a Mennonite. And so that's how I grew up. And after we were in Guatemala for a long time, he was sent to do church planting and missionary work in California because everybody realized that half of Central America was in California. So went there to develop congregations there. So that's how I grew up. And I didn't come to the Methodist Church till I went to college. I wanted to go to Penn State. And so I decided to come back to Pennsylvania and discovered the Methodist Church through an aunt who was kind of like, she was kind of referred to as like the aunt that was, she was with the Methodists. They're not really on fire. They're just, but everything I met about my aunt was like, she was like the most committed person I had ever met. So she told me about this church in Pennsylvania, and that's how I discovered the United Methodist Church. It's a whirlwind.
I love your story though, Lydia, because it talks about inclusivity too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've had these different uh, experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and they've, I'm sure, informed how you have become now a leader in the United Methodist Church. You've had
Mm-hmm.
these different
Mm-hmm.
experiences that have given you new perspectives, or a variety of perspectives.
Sure.
So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I'll just say, yay, the United Methodist Church won. We got you. Well, I've often wondered, and it's my own fault because I have not attended a Spanish speaking United Methodist service, but
Mm-hmm.
I have wondered how does the culture, because you mentioned that, you know, born and raised in the United States and, American, but you're still going to have likely to
Absolutely.
have
Mm-hmm.
connections to wherever your family's heritage, originated.
Mm-hmm.
How does that inform what happens to you when you go to church? When you have church, what does that look like?
So there's a new phrase or a new term that's come out in sociology that's called 200 percenters. And that refers to people who identify 100% as being, US American and 100% from Latin from their whatever country they identify with from their family. And what it means is this reality of being bicultural, or in many cases multicultural, right? Because there's multi-ethnic Latin persons. So I think that is a real a sense of who I am as I enter into worship. There are parts of me that understand, or um, that like a more traditional. I love the processions with the organ, and I love the candles and all the things that were introduced to me through the United Methodist Church. And then but I also love the intentional connection with those things that are soul driven, that are outside of the mind into the heart, which, I don't think Wesley was too far from that, right? Very connected to my senses, to my body, to the things that come out of experiencing the awesomeness of God, whether in worship. So I think in a perfect world, I would probably get both of those things in the midst of worship. So in a Hispanic Latino congregation, just like in any congregation of the United Methodist Church, we don't have, I mean, we have a book of worship, but we don't necessarily have like liturgical police, watching our services and saying, oh, you have to do this. There are some things that mark us as United Methodists, but we don't have like the Catholic Church or the Episcopal Church that has a book, and everybody keeps to that. Um, we have freedom and form. There's form, but there's freedom. So the Hispanic Latino congregation is the same way. Some churches are more charismatic than others. Some use traditional hymns that have been translated into Spanish. Some use praise and worship music. Some use coritos, which are small songs that communicate some kind of spiritual truth, that have been carried almost like oral tradition, like spirituals over the years, and in many spaces, in many places across denominations, those corritos are known. Even if they're not United Methodist churches, they're just known because they're known in the Hispanic Latino communities at large. So, yeah, I think you'll find all of those things in a Hispanic congregation.
I do love that as the United Methodist Church, as you said, we have, I think the term you was freedom and form.
Uh-huh.
And that is a mark of the United
Yep.
Methodist Church.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
why I believe we can live into this inclusive space, this diverse
Absolutely.
space. And
Absolutely.
if we're not some places are doing it better than others. But it's always, I mean, that's very Methodist of us. Um,
Absolutely.
so as we, have this denomination that really welcomes and encourages us to live into our diversity and our inclusion, what does the work of the Plan for Hispanic Latino Ministry look like?
So our main task is to accompany, and we use a word in Spanish called acompañamiento, which comes from a musical term, right? The accompaniment is the thing that goes with the melody, right? So that it sounds fuller, it sounds richer, it sounds, So our mission is to accompany annual conferences as they build strategies that fit their context and their reality. So we believe that, just like I think that's part of also our tradition as Methodist is to build something, you need to plan for it well, right? You need to work. And so if you're intentional about working with Hispanic Latin folks, you're going to build a strategy around that so that you have, goals that meet the context, so that you have processes that do no harm, so that you have ways of holding yourselves accountable, right? And also at the end, measurable things that are their goals and that you can say in these 4 years, this is what we've done, or in this, so we come alongside and help people think about those strategies, help annual conferences think about those strategies so that they do all the good they can. Again, yeah.
I love that. Do you have any favorite stories of initiatives that the plan has been a part of that you're really proud to tell?
Well,
And
there's a
I'm sure
lot of
there are a lot. I know there are
there's a
a
lot of
lot.
stories, but I'll tell you the some of the most recent ones. There's three places. The Tennessee Western Kentucky Annual Conference has been doing great work under the leadership of Pastor Miriam Cortez, who is the chair of the Committee on Hispanic Latino Ministry of the annual conference. She's been training her laity. She's been, growing communities of faith. And I mean, I was so happy to see that the first chartered congregation of this new conference, of Tennessee Western Kentucky New Conference, was a Hispanic Latino congregation, and that says a lot. So the plan has been accompanying that on your conference and that particular ministry for quite some time, and we're proud of that. The second place is Pacific Northwest, or uh, they also refer to it as the Great Northwest, under the leadership of their director for Hispanic Latino ministry, Cruz Edwin Santos, Reverend Cruz Edwin Santos. He has been a phenomenal leader, organizing the annual conference, creating ways for the voice and the presence of Hispanic Latino ministry is felt and heard in the annual conference, creating partnerships with non-Hispanic congregations so that they can engage in the work of doing ministry with Hispanic Latinos. I mean, that's been a great opportunity. I expect a whole lot more from that. And the other thing is, the Brazilian ministries that have been growing both in New England annual conference with Pastor Juarez Concalves, who is the director of Hispanic Latino ministry there, growing Hispanic churches like crazy. He's a consummate multiplier. And then there's a Brazilian ministry that has actually they're going to celebrate their 9th year. And it is a reconciling Brazilian congregation at First United Methodist Church in Miami. And we're super excited to partner with them as well. So those are the top 3 that come to my mind right now. There's a whole lot others, but those are really giving me joy these days.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Well, as we finish up today, is there anything you had hoped we would talk about that we didn't talk about, or anything that you wanted to just add?
So one thing that people don't know that also came out of General Conference is that the plan had existed, had in the General Board of Global Ministries for a long time, since its existence, since its inception. And now we are moving to the General Commission on Religion and Race. They have decided to partner with us, and we with them. They're going to be our new home. And in there, I encourage people to go look at their website, because they have some great resources to help you celebrate and have conversation around Hispanic Latino ministry. Particularly, we partnered with them in a new series called Afro Latinidad, which is Afro Latine folks who are, so like I said, the multiple diversity of our own identity is real, and this is one more way for you to learn more about that. So I encourage that.
Thank you for sharing about that. We will definitely link to GCOR's website on the episode
Yes,
page. Yes, there are some
absolutely.
tremendous resources there. And I was at General Conference and I missed that news as
It was
well.
a
So,
consent calendar thing, you know?
okay, there you go. Well, that's exciting. And that is great. Well, as we finish today, I will ask you the question that we ask all of our guests on Get Your Spirit
Sure.
in Shape. And that's, how do you keep your own spirit in shape?
So I do walking. That's one of the things I do. Sometimes, you know, sometimes I have to push myself to walk, right? But I do walking, and that helps me kind of have a conversation, in the outdoors. And I'm also a musician and singer, and so anytime I'm able to connect with music, whether I'm doing it or I'm listening to it, that's another way for me. That's a whole other way of praying. Um, so those 2 things. And oftentimes I'll do them together, walking and singing at the same time. So
Well, I love that. I'm also a walker. I'm not a singer, but I am a walker. So I appreciate
nice.
that.
Yeah.
That just that connection when you're out there outside
Mhm.
in nature. So Lydia, thank you for sharing your gifts with the United Methodist Church, for your faithful ministry, and just all that you bring to the entire denomination. I just appreciate that, and all that you're doing so much. And thank you
Thank
for
you
being
so
a guest.
much.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
having me.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that.
That was the Reverend Dr. Lydia Munoz discussing the rich tapestry of Hispanic and Latine heritage we enjoy in the United Methodist Church, and how we can best embrace the diversity by listening to one another's stories and respecting one another's journeys. To learn more, go to umc.org/podcast and look for this episode, where you will find helpful links and a transcript of our conversation. If you have questions or comments, feel free to email me at a special email address just for Get Your Spirit in Shape listeners, gysis@umcom.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, we invite you to leave a review on the platform where you get your podcast. Thank you for being a Get Your Spirit in Shape listener. I'm Crystal Cavanis, and I look forward to the next time that we're together.